pick up, I guess we left off with demand, so we'll pick up here talking about supply side of it. So let's go ahead and continue that. And let me share my screen with you. Okay, so what is the supply? So this is mainly on the producer side of things. Who's producing product? So the ability and willingness to produce and sell a specific quantity of a good or purchase or service at alternative prices. Again, ceteris paribus. So a snapshot in time, what would a firm or firms be willing to supply to the marketplace of certain product, whatever they produce at a given point in time. So that's an official definition of supply. But for me, what I want is, of course, understand the definitions, but also I want you uh, to make sure that you can apply these things, which we're going to work on applications as well. All right, so it's a supply or schedule or curve. You can produce these schedules straight out of if you have the data and you have prices, and there's several agencies that can collect that data, and some of it you can get pretty easily. Thank goodness that we have the internet now, so we can look up things. So during a specified period of time, supply curve, we'll mainly work with curves, but we also have schedules. What are we willing and able to sell at a given price? We have individual firm supply, and then all the firms in a particular industry. We can look at market supply. We could even look at aggregate supply for the whole U.S. economy. So the law of supply says, other things being equal, as price goes up, quantity supplied goes up. As price falls, the quantity supplied falls. So think of yourself as running a business. When prices are moving up, would you be more happy? Would you be happy to keep providing more for product if the price goes up? Sure, it's profit motive. And if price goes down, they're not as eager, or would not be as eager to supply with when prices goes down. So prices as an incentive, it's the profit motive in our economy, the way that our economy's set up. But the way firms work, and we'll get into this a little bit later, firms also they have to manage the cost side of their business. It's not just how much revenue are we getting from our product. It costs money to produce it, and we have to be aware of that. So that eventually costs will go up and more decisions have to be made. So my quick opinion of it, um, firms are greedy. Simple as that. They want to make a profit. Without a profit motive, nobody would want to produce anything. Why bother? Right. So there's no point in it. If the firms can't make money, they're not going to do it. And that's as simple as it is. But there's different ways of producing things in the United States economy. This is how we're going to run. This is how it runs. So yeah, make profit, we'll produce it. If not, we won't. Higher prices make us more profitable as a firm, so we would produce more. So the supply curve, as you could imagine, this one looks different than the demand curve. Remember, firms are happy to provide more products when prices go up. So you can see that we have a price of 5 with a supply of 60, of 4. Prices are going down, firms would supply less. All right, so they're adjusting their production because the prices are lower. They're not making as much money, so they would produce less. How that works is, well, if they produce less, then they're cutting back on their costs because the prices aren't there to meet their costs and hopefully exceed them for them if they're making a profit. At a price of 3, the quantity supplied is 35. So again, this is the price of gasoline, for example. And let me show you, let me draw this for you on my whiteboard. Again, we have very important. What are we drawing? You label our axes. We put price on the vertical, quantity on the horizontal, and our supply curve looks like that. It's upward sloping because say pick a price P1, Q1. If prices go up in the marketplace for whatever reason, the firms would really like that. And so out to Q2, remember quantities increase moving that direction. So when prices go up, firms say, all right, more profit, we'll produce more. All right, so ask yourself if this makes sense. Prices go up, firms supply more. All right, prices fall, farms would move the other direction. So a change in quantity supplied is just a movement along this supply curve along it. But we're also going to talk about changes in supply, which will shift the curve. But that's basically how you draw the supply curve. Okay. So again, practice these. Practice, practice, practice. You go back, share my screen again. And so we got an individual supply curve, and then we have changes in supply. In this case, supply curve decreases, it moves to the left, this direction, and supply increases, it moves to the right. Well, I better start over, a whole new drawing here. So I'm going to draw this again. And our initial supply curve is S1. Okay. And so I have S1. Now, a decrease in supply, the curve shifts into S2. No, sorry, we're calling that S3. I'll try to be consistent. So it goes that way. Okay. That's a decrease in supply. I'll label that. That's a decrease. It moves to the left. Very critical that you understand that. An increase in supply, we'll call that S2, is a movement that direction. So that's an increase right there. An increase in supply. Okay, very critical. And again, another way to think about that. Suppose you have a price here. I'll make something up at $5, and it goes across through here. So at $5 at S1, there will be, let's just call that Q1. An increase in supply means at a given price, firms would be willing to supply more. That's what that shift in the curve indicates. So now we'd be out there like at Q2. Right, so an increase in supply at a given price of 5, we go from Q1 to Q2. That's an increase. The industry would be willing to supply more. On the other side of that, if supply were to decrease, we're moving back to S3, this S3 curve, and I'll put down here Q3, that would be a reduction in quantity. If supply decreased, it's a reduction in quantity. So at a given price, a decrease in supply means the industries are not going to supply as much to the marketplace. So this is critical when we start putting supply and demand together. All right, go back to my share my screen again, and clear this board. So it's very critical that you draw these supply and demand curves. Practice, practice, practice. You'll get more practice on the quizzes, but by the time we take our first exam, I want you to be really good at this. So that's our change in supply. And what causes the determinants of supply? Resource prices. Firms need resources to produce, so prices of resources change. They're not, that may change how much or how little they produce. A change in technology. For example, I'll talk about this a lot, but we've kind of been living through it. The technological boom, the tech industry boom in the 1990s pretty much made it easier to increase supply of many products. So technology changes can increase or decrease supply. Taxes and subsidies, the argument is, well, you tax firms more, they will just reduce supply, pass the price on or the tax on to the consumers and so forth. So changes in taxes and subsidies actually encourage firms to produce. We've seen a lot of that in the clean energy industry. Changing the price of other goods, changing producer expectations. What a firms think is going to happen in the future, they may decide to increase more or less. It just depends on what they think. And the number of sellers could definitely change supply. If a lot of people leave an area, then all of a sudden you could see probably more houses on the market because they're moving out of an area. So that would be something affecting real estate, supply of houses. So other things, and again, think about these. No need for me to read them to you, but I want you to think about these. So some specific examples of what we just talked about, microchips in computers. I mentioned earlier, increase in the price of crude oil increases or reduces the supply of gasoline, for example. That's a supply impact. Technology, AI, we got to keep eyes out for AI, for example, in the future. Um, and taxes and subsidies, they can either reduce supply or increase supply. It just depends. And just these are just specific examples. But again, I encourage you to think about these examples on your own. Think of some more other prices. Increase in the price of cucumbers and watermelons. So increase the cucumber prices decreases the supply of watermelons. So increase in the price of alcohol hand sanitizers causes the decrease in the supply of gin. We actually saw that during COVID, where we started using more of the alcohol byproducts to make more hand sanitizer, and it affected the supply of certain liquors and spirits. But so that a lot of times that's specifically related to the particular product and its complementary relationships or substitution relationships. And there's some others. Expectations. You think gas will fall next year, and for example, you can make adjustments to your supply and maybe increase the supply of oil so you have more inventory, for example. Supply is a little bit, you got to think about an industry perspective. Increasing the number of tattoo parlors increases the number of supply of tattoos, of course. That makes sense. So the number of suppliers has a big effect on it. So now we've got our building blocks. Encourage you, go draw demand curve, draw supply curves. You know which way, when I say an increase in supply, which way does the supply curve go? When I say decrease, which direction does it go? That's important because now we can think about market equilibrium. Now we can look at, okay, there's changes. I see changes in the marketplace. What is causing that? This is where economists come in to kind of explain things and to help make maybe policy suggestions moving forward. So we'll get into equilibrium price and quantity, surplus or shortages, and how are firms allocating products efficiently. So we got productive efficiency. And again, prices are great. I love price analysis, and especially in terms of microeconomics, because it tells it tells you everything you need to know what's going on in the marketplace. And it's the price. You see it, you know what the price is, and you can go and you'll make decisions accordingly. So using the technology, um, producing the right mix of goods, that's allocative efficiency, and prices are all involved there. How does society want to produce? A lot of that's a high level question, but that's what efficient allocation means. So let's put these two really neat concepts, analytical tools together in one chart, and that's called equilibrium analysis. So on one side, we got prices and quantity demanded. That's on the left side. On the right side, we have prices and quantity supplied. And you can see all the things that we worked about putting this together in our minds. Downward sloping demand curve, upper sloping supply curve, where they intersect right here is equilibrium. So how do I know that's equilibrium? Other than if I can look at a picture, I can see that they're intersecting right there at 3. But look at the individual schedules on the side. So at 3, at a price of 3, consumers, that's the demand people, the demand side, demand 7,000. And at a price of 3 on the supply side, they're willing to supply 7,000. So again, that's where the 7,000 is equal for quantity supplied and quantity demanded. So that's equilibrium. So graphically, again, I will show you the analysis tools that we're going to use in this class. So we've got our price and quantity. We got our supply curve, looks like that. And we got our demand curve, looks like that. And that is the equilibrium point. I'll call that maybe P subscript E and Q subscript E. That's equilibrium. Interesting part about economics is what happens. What does it mean when prices are not at equilibrium? So let's take that, and maybe I will use a different color. I'm going to go back and change my values here, try to be consistent with our chart. So that's a quantity of 7 and a price of 3. So what happens at the price of 4? So this is called a surplus. So you draw your line across right here. Okay, at a price of 4, price went up. So you can imagine consumers are not happy. Producers would be more happy. At a price of 4, consumers say, I don't like that. I only want to consume 4. That's 4,000, but I put a 4 in there because the price went up. And this is gasoline. So price of gas goes up, people demand less. That should make sense to you. Think about that one. At a price of 4, producers say, all right, more profits. We'll provide 10,000 units. So what does that mean? Suppliers want to provide 10,000, consumers only want 4,000. There's a surplus. There's gasoline not being sold. That's represented by that this distance right here, which it would be 10 minus 4. The surplus would be 6. There's also, if you go drop below equilibrium, say a price of 2, and draw that line across, that's called a shortage. So price fell, consumers are happy. We'll demand, I don't know, it's like about 11,000 gallons, but producers are not happy. They only want to provide about 4. So there's more demand in the market than there is supply. So it'd be the shortage with this case would be that's not exactly, it's like 10 and a half minus 4. So we got a shortage there. So that's what a shortage is. So a lot of times in our market, our economy, we find that products are in surplus or shortage, and it's and society looks to economists to try to help try to solve those problems, and we can use economic principles to do that. So those are really critical, surpluses and shortages, and we get that from equilibrium analysis. Okay, so I want to pause here and my video, again, I want to keep the videos watchable. I don't want them to be too big. So I'll pause this, well, I'll stop this video and we will go and we'll pick up here with our next video. So again, if you have any questions, let me know. This is Dr. Scott Parrott, Pulaski State Community College.